Recording.
Okay.
Okay.
Then if you guys are ready, I will let everyone in.
All right. Thank you,
Anthony.
There we go.
Jennifer Fisher has joined us again.
Yes, it's a great first name, Mr. Fisher.
I don't know how to fix it.
Have we got everybody signed in?
So everyone who was in the waiting room is now in, yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's Jennifer Campbell speaking. Brian is not with us, Brian Thompson. Somehow he wangled a trip over to Europe to see his daughter. So hopefully he has a great time visiting with her. A couple ground rules for tonight. We have three presenters and they are Jane Edstrom, David Weichert, Louise Buskus, and we have only 1 hour. So hopefully the presenters will do the presentation and Jane will go first and then she will hand it to David and David will hand it over to Louise. If we have questions after each presenter has done their slideshow, see if there's any questions. If there are more questions, and we have to be mindful of the time because we're now shrinking in time, that my email will come up at the end. And if people want their questions to be answered by either all three or one of our presenters of the three, I will take the questions and send them to them and make sure we get you an answer to your questions. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to the NOC and the ITO. Very good friend, Jane Edstrom. Jane, it's your show now.
Well, good evening, everybody. And it's very nice to be with you all. And thank you very much for allowing me to share some of my experiences of Tokyo. I was very fortunate in being able to not only be chosen to go to the Olympics, but actually go to the Olympics because it was kind of nip and tuck up until the very last minute. Anthony, would you allow me to share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to do that now.
Okay, no problem. And I always lose my cursor to begin with. Okay, there we go. I am going to stop my video and just go with, oh, can you still see my screen? No.
Looks like Ian's taken over. Let me see if I can.
Ian, you're on mute. And Ian, you need to stop sharing, okay? Jane, you can share now.
Okay, I got to set it up again and ask for it. Yes. Okay, here we go. I was once again chosen to go to the Tokyo Olympics. This is just before the competition at the Olympics started. There's two sets of Olympic rings outside the stadium, and this is one of them. And this was the day before we picked up our uniforms. Up until this point, we got to wear street clothes, and thereafter we lived in uniforms. Before going to Japan, we received for the Olympics a 70-page playbook to review, which was totally on COVID protocols. We had to get 2 COVID tests by a Japanese accredited lab, of which in Winnipeg there was only 1. And each of my tests were $450 each. Before we left, we had to download 2 apps on a mobile phone. Otherwise, you weren't allowed to board the plane. And to support these apps, I had to buy a new mobile phone as well. Arrival in Japan, just after deplaning, we had to take another COVID test, and you weren't allowed to leave the airport until the result was obtained. And of course, it better be negative. So fortunately, mine was negative, and I only had to wait 50 minutes. Some people waited 7 to 9 hours if there were a bunch of large flights coming in. We were also instructed only to use games transport. We were restricted to the venue and our hotel. We all wore masks 24/7, indoors or outdoors. The only time I took my mask off was within my own room. There were daily COVID tests and health reports. So before we went through security, we dropped off our little test tube of saliva. And each day we had to, on one of the apps, fill out a COVID questionnaire, as well as submit the code that was on our test tube. There were temperature checks everywhere. When you entered a room, it seemed they checked your temperature. There were hand sanitizing stations everywhere. And in the restaurants, you had to wear plastic gloves to serve yourself food. And there were plastic dividers at all of the tables. So they went above and beyond to keep us all safe. When we arrived at the stadium, we were given a sanitary kit, which included masks, enough for at least one a day for the time you were there, a number of test tubes for one a day for the number of days that you were there, as well as some hand sanitizer and a couple other things that I can't remember right now, but it was kind of fun to get a sanitary kit. Stadium COVID protocols, there were temperature checks and hand sanitizing at the security check, mask use except for when drinking or competing, and that included the athletes. The athletes had to wear masks except when they were competing. There was physical distancing everywhere. Athletes were required to hand sanitize before going through the mix zone. Athletes placed their own medals around their necks. So nothing was handed to the athletes. They took the flowers, they took the medal themselves. This is just an overview of the stadium. It's quite a beautiful area. My role when I was in Tokyo was secretary to the jury. So I wasn't afforded the opportunity to be on the field of play except well before the competition or well after. The secretary to the jury, I interfaced with the Technical Information Center. I communicated with team leaders. I collected all information, paperwork, video, evidence, whether it be personal or paperwork to support the appeal. I coordinated the communication and convening of the jury. I communicated sorry? Oh, I thought somebody was asking something. I coordinated the communicated the appeal and decision to all the appropriate parties. I was on a WhatsApp group with probably 30 different people or groups that had to know when an appeal happened or what the decision was. And I also accompanied the chair of the jury to deliver the decision to whatever team was appealing. This is the jury area in the stands. You can see that every other chair has some type of a cover over it. So people were to sit in every other chair in the stands. We wore our masks. And there are 2 ITOs on the jury that sit the whole time, and the chair of the jury sits the whole time. So on the bottom right corner, you see Abby Hoffman from Canada. She has been the chair of the jury for the past, I don't know how many Olympics as well as World Championships. She's a veteran, very, very knowledgeable. And in the upper right-hand corner is Helen Roberts, who's an ITO from Australia. In the middle is John Cronin, who is an ITO from Ireland. And the lady on the left is a council member from Colombia. So 2 council members rotate through, and Abby, of course, is on the council, but there are 3 standards that stay, and then the other 2 rotate through. And I, of course, serve I serve the jury throughout the whole time as well. Just for interest's sake, I'll run through this very, very quickly. Appeals in Tokyo there were 19 in total. We got off very, very fortunate. There were 72 in Rio. But in Rio, it was sort of the initiation of the video referee, and athletes were not really aware right off the hop that there were cameras or eyes everywhere for lane violations or for obstruction or anything that might happen. So, or there were more questions from teams, and then they got to see video and realized that they didn't really have a hope in some of their appeals. Of the 19 that we had in Tokyo, there were 8 dealing with obstruction, mostly in distance races. There were 6 involving relay exchange zones, 2 dealing with lane violations, and 3 miscellaneous ones. This is the jury sitting once again, and there is a different council member with us on the very far right. He is from Brazil. And then the rest of us in our formal uniforms without our jackets on, because it was extremely hot the whole time we were there. And the gentleman hanging over the railing in the upper part is from Spain. He was one of the council members that rotated through on the jury and just didn't happen to be serving on that evening. I'm going to talk about the exchange zone violations because it does impact on a starter's assistant, especially at the start line. There were 8 appeals that transpired from one race of the mixed relay in the 4x4. The US second runner stepped onto the track after the second runners have to wait for all of the starting blocks, the lane markers, all the cables to get off the track before they can step onto the track and take up their position. And we all know that they have to step within the zone, which is blue line to blue line for a 4x4. And the US second runner did step in front of the blue line, except that she stepped in front of the blue line at the end of the zone, not at the beginning of the zone. So a number of officials verbally tried to let her know that she needed to step back. Either she didn't hear them or didn't understand, didn't move. And consequently, there was an appeal, and the jury ruled in favor of reinstating the US team on the grounds that the athlete was not correctly placed in the exchange zone. So at the start of, I'll wait till the next slide because that's where we're going to discuss it. But there was a problem of a lack of officials at the exchange zone. The track referee, I could hear him on the radio saying, we need help down here. Is there anybody that can help at the 4x4 exchange zones? And sort of nobody answered. After all of these appeals and the following day, they remedied it by having probably an official per athlete in every exchange zone. I mean, there were more officials in blue jackets down there than the athletes. But this was definitely a problem. So the SA oftentimes, I know in Manitoba, we're just going to turn my phone off. Oftentimes, the starters assistants help with the 4x4 exchanges since it's quite a battle zone. So it's very, very important that not only are people in the proper event, in the proper heat, but also in the proper lanes. Now in the exchange zones, it's very, very important that they're placed in the proper lane as well as in the proper exchange zone. And if the person or the athlete is not in the proper area, an official should actually go out and put them or point to the ground where they're supposed to be, so that we don't have the situation like we had in Tokyo. This is sort of a listing of the call room. I've got a number of pictures of the call room in Tokyo. They had 2 call rooms set up for the Olympics. There was call room number 1 was a gathering tent between the warm-up area and the stadium. Basically a check the athlete and what event. Call room number 2, or the final call room, was under the back.
There's an official here who.
If we could, yes, thank you. If we could all mute ourselves, that would be great. Call room number 2 was under the back straight stands, and it extended for the length of the track area. It was a huge area. Jennifer would have been in her heyday being able to set up this area. It was air conditioned, and it was totally Mondo surfaced. There were a number of pods set up, and there were a number of large rooms off of this area as well, 2 of which were used for rest areas, one for the decathletes and one for the heptathletes. Just for interest's sake, each pod had a TV monitor and a myriad of sanitation supplies. So this is the beginning of the call room area. They're just sort of setting up the barrier and some of the pods. Here you can see some of the pods. They're very spacious. All of the athletes were physically distanced. You can see on the far right, there's a TV monitor. On the far left, there's a whiteboard. On the whiteboard said the event, what time they entered, what time they left. There were a number of charts on there. In a slide coming up, you'll see some of the information that's on those. But it was very well lit, very airy, very, very nice. Here you can see down, I'm at the entry level or the exit level, and where it says Tokyo 2020 on the left down there, people, the athletes arrived through there, but you can see the number of whiteboards on the left. On each one of these benches, they had all of the supplies or sanitary supplies, measuring devices, etc. Here you can start seeing some of the supplies that they put up. And these are, then they had garbage receptacles so that things could be disposed of easily. This is the end of the call room area. Just to the right, they're going to exit. But this was, I guess, the command center of the call room area. The outlined area that you see, there are long jump sand pits under there. So they were trying to cover them so people didn't fall in them or trip on them. The combined events restroom. This was an enclosed area. Initially, all they had was chairs here. You see the TV monitor. Behind, you could set up tables for massage. They brought in mats, and the combined events athletes and officials, the combined events referee or the ITO moving with the combined events athletes were served hot meals for lunch and dinner, depending on how long the session lasted. So they got treated quite nicely. And this is one of the pods. Once again, you can see that the TV monitor is there. And here you can see the whiteboard where they have all of the information on it. This one was the very last day. We're in our formal uniforms, and we had just finished a briefing with all of the officials. So clipboards, everything's ready to go because this was just prior to the last session. Oh, I forgot to put that blank slide off. Just some observations that I had from the Olympics. In spite of the smothering heat, no family, no friends or spectators in the stands, the athletes came to compete. There were outstanding performances, 3 world records, Olympic records, too many to count. And there were national, season, and personal bests in every heat or round. Amazing performances. Athletes and teams banded together to support each other because they were all they had. Usually in the Olympics, the athletes are allowed to venue hop. Their ID gets them into any of the Olympic venues. Because of COVID restrictions, all of the athletes were restricted to either their hotel or the athletes' village, depending on where they were staying, and only the venue that they were competing in. So when they had downtime, they tended to go to their own venue and cheer on their own teams. And it really, really supported the team camaraderie, which was outstanding. Japan was outstanding in their planning for the original 2020 Olympics. And then when they were postponed, they had to replan for the following year. And then COVID took over and they had to plan again. And they definitely planned for success. They had every detail down, and they kept us all safe. It was an amazing event. For us, when we go to the national championships, we have anywhere between 80 and 100 officials. At the Olympics, there were 240 Japanese judges for athletics. And here you get a little bit of a view of them. This was a briefing on the last session at the stadium. Following that, we had a marathon, but that was in Sapporo. So this is the last briefing at the back of the call room. So you see there's no limit to the number of officials that they had. Just some favorite moments, and I know I've probably gone a little too long, so I'm not going to dwell on these other than the fact that it was awesome being in the stands for the men's high jump tie, and some of the event, all of the events were outstanding. And here you see the medal presentation for the high jump men, where there are 2 gentlemen on the gold medal stand, and one on third on bronze and none on the silver. So it was an amazing evening. Thank you again for allowing me to share my experiences. And it was a very unique experience, but an awesome experience. So Jennifer, I don't know if you want to field questions now or whether you want to wait till later.
If there's any questions, let's go quickly now, then we'll turn it over to David. Or we can wait for questions at the very end of time. If we don't have enough time, then they can send their questions to me, and I'll make sure the 3 presenters get the list of questions, and we'll get them answered for everybody. So I would say, if there's no questions, maybe we'll go directly to David, okay?
Okay. I'm not sure if you can see this. I'm trying to share my screen. And I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me, Jennifer?
Yeah, we can hear you, David.
Yes.
I just can't see your screen yet.
Can you see the screen?
Not yet. No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, this might be the wrong one anyway. Hang on. Yeah, it's the wrong one, I know. Okay, I'm going to go back in. I'm sorry for my technological illiteracy here. Da, 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 da.
Would it be wise, David, to see if Louise can go and give yourself?
No, I've got it now.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah. I
Thank
just
you.
need to make sure that we can see it. I don't know why it's not showing up on here. It should be. Anthony, I'm not sure if you can help here or not. My screen is not showing.
Your screen, like on your...
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Okay.
Okay, sorry for that, everyone. And here we go. I'll try and be brief and to the point. This is essentially from the Paralympic Games. So after Jane, we had the Paralympic Games and I was video referee. And so this is an overview of what it was like as a video referee. And I'm sorry, this is going to be this is the wrong show again. Apologies. Yeah, there's 56 and that's not quite right. Apologies. I'm going to try and get the right one.
Just while David's finding his presentation, you are all in for a treat because David and Louise are much more techno savvy in setting up a professional PowerPoint presentation than I am. So they're photos you were really going to enjoy.
Okay, so here we go. Again, apologies for being so long and setting this up. And this is an overview from myself as a video referee. So while Jane mentioned talking about getting into the stadium, this is the hotel we were staying in. And essentially it took 5 minutes to walk up the sidewalk on the other side of the street and down this side of the street to the entrance of the stadium. And this is where there were at least 5 volunteers wanting to take your temperature before you went to the airport type screening device. These are some of our colleagues. As Jane mentioned, there were 240 local or NTOs, and here we have about 237 NTOs. And there are also some ITOs here, all wearing the Paralympic ITO uniform. And here is Friday night. These are all of the ITOs who were in attendance at the Tokyo Paralympic Games. This is a look at the stadium, and you'll see that from looking inside the stadium, it looks like the stands are full, but as Jane pointed out, they weren't. It's just the way the seating was, the seats were designed that it looked like it was full. So the seats make the stadium look full. You can see here that there are white seats and darker seats. There was a video adjudication room in which I was stationed, And there was also a video room for the jury of appeal and for teams to look at video. Our video room was air conditioned because of the equipment that was there, as you will see in a moment or two. This is one of the control screens, and you will see that up here, this is a control screen as well, but they would send files from the back to the front. They were able to split the screen into 4, which was very helpful for us. And it was also very helpful in the video room for the jury of appeal. Here you can see a picture of Amy and Catherine standing, and you can see Ben. Ben was the video referee for field events. And I said the video room, the brains of the operation, Amy and Catherine. And the real brains of the operation, however, were all these cables that were plugged into Host Broadcast and Hawkeye, because that's where we got the video feeds from. What we looked for track, we say we looked proactively. Now, I should also point out that the first time video refereeing was used was in the 2016 World Indoor Championships in Portland, Oregon. That was the first time it was used officially. And some of us were blessed to see it in 1994 at the Commonwealth Games in Victoria, where it was being used, but not officially. So what we were looking for proactively in track, because we were watching every race, we were looking for guide, push, pull, or propelling of athletes. We were looking at the proper use of tethers, guide exchanges, assistance that contravenes the rules, running or wheeling out of lane, that should be out of lane, sorry, cutting in too early at the brake line, taking drinks from other than the drink stations in the marathon, and relay passes, and starting in zone, among other things. In the field, reactively, we were actually watching every field event while it was going on as well. And if we spotted something that looked unusual, we would look at it again and make a determination and tell the referee at the field of play what was going on. And so we were looking at proper throwing technique. We were looking at implement landings and measurements. We were looking at lifting in seated throws and proper takeoff in horizontal jumps, again, amongst other things. So what we found, you can see here, the tether is in the hand of the athlete, but not in the hand of the guide. And they're about to go over the finish line, and it has to be, they have to be tethered until the athlete reaches the finish line. We also see on the picture on the right, where an athlete in a wheelchair is wheeling over the line, which is the same as stepping on the line. And then on the immediate right, there's an image of a holding bar, which is technically illegal, but it was approved by the technical delegate to be used in this competition. Why it's technically illegal is the holding bar can only be one piece of metal. And this one is 2 pieces, where there's 1 piece inside of a sleeve of another. And that's technically not allowed. And here, what we found, starter's assistants helping set the starting blocks for one of the athletes. I think this was an athlete with an arm amputation, and they're allowed to have help to set the starting blocks. It could have been a leg amputation as well, where an athlete is unable to get down on the track in order to set their starting blocks. This is an example of the referee log that we filled out every day. So it shows the date, the session number, the start time for the event, whether it was a field event or a track event, and what the event was, whether it was male or female. whether it was a final, semifinal, or a section or a heat, etc. And then on the right, it shows a description of what we found in the event. Now, this was the first time we've ever found a marriage proposal at a track event. And it was very unusual. It was a T11 race. You can tell because all of the athletes have eye masks and they have their eye cavities completely covered. But this is a guide proposing to an athlete after a 200-meter race. And they came last, but they came first. Closing ceremonies, we were lucky that we were allowed to go to the closing ceremonies, and I was lucky because I went there. COVID precautions, as Jane pointed out in her presentation, there were screens in the breakfast room, and you had to wear plastic gloves to get your food. And this is a picture of the vial that she was saying that she got, and they all had different codes on them for which day you had. And we had to wear masks everywhere, inside and outside. We had our temperatures checked either through this method, and we had to fill out, as Jane mentioned, in the OCHA app, and there was another app called the COCO, which was a GPS app watching where you were. And if you ever wandered out of your allowable area, you could be arrested and deported. And we were basically allowed to be in the hotel and to go to the stadium, and that was it. We weren't allowed out to go to restaurants even. Now, I think Louise is going to tell you something a little bit different anyway. So, are there any questions anyone has? The Paralympics were very much like the Olympics. Seeing no questions, I will hand it over to Louise now.
Thank you, David. Louise,
okay.
Welcome.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Louise. Go ahead.
And you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Let's hope we have better luck with me screen sharing than I did the other night. Okay, so this is my impressions of the Olympics. This was my first Olympics, so I have kind of a little bit, I was a little bit more enthusiastic about little details than David and Jane. Going inside Olympic Stadium was mind-blowing. I mean, I said that I compared it to walking on holy ground. It was just, I was not prepared for the overwhelming feeling of walking in there. And the other thing that you don't think about is ceremonies. So they have to, after the opening ceremonies, they have to put all the grass back in. The moment we were done competition, they're pulling that sod back out and preparing for closing ceremonies. So those facility people, they earned their keep big time. So yeah, everybody alluded to the number of officials and volunteers was phenomenal. And so these are just the officials, national officials, and international. All the volunteers had blue uniforms. This was a view of TIC. This is just one of the throws crew. Again, we never have throws crews that big. These are all the people that were in the 2 call rooms. Again, mind-blowing how many people they had. How many people does it take to tie down a frame? Apparently up to 13. How many people does it take to set a blocks? Quite a few. And there's volunteers everywhere, even vacuuming the track. There was programmers, and the programmers were dealing with the implement return vehicles. These are not remote controlled, they are robotic, and they use GPS, and it was just, I mean, I was just mesmerized by watching these things, knowing that it's all robotic. And speaking of robotics, they had robotic stuff everywhere. They were taking your pictures with robots. They were handing out moist towelettes, bringing you water, and freaked out our photo finish girl when the robotic rubbish tin came up behind her and asked if she had any trash. So as officials, international officials, we're kind of like Switzerland when we go. We're not really representing our country, but it is pretty sweet to be able to see the Canadian flag. Popped up on throwing frames, then when you're getting medals, even cooler when you get to, and I had an awesome vantage point watching this. I was an umpire that evening, and I was up in the media stand, so no better place to watch than from the media stand. Then during the victory ceremony, I was able to sneak out and get this picture, which there's not usually people back there, so that was pretty special to be able to get that. And the view of the flag raising and listening to the anthem is, again, way cool. This is from up in the jury room. That was Brent's same night he got that. There wasn't many, obviously no fans, but that's all coaches. So it was nice to see them out, coaches and fellow athletes out in the stands. That was a picture of the wheelie from Brent's wheelchair. Again, maybe a picture that I really shouldn't be able to get because it was a no photographer zone, but I was pretty excited to get it. So our formal uniform night, we had a little fun. We called ourselves the Blue Sisters. I was very fortunate. So the marathon for the Paralympics used what was going to be the original course for also the Olympics. They didn't use it for the Olympics. They chose to go up to Sapporo because it was going to be a little cooler. Don't think it was. So we got to use the course that was originally for that. I got, I think, the coolest one. So on the photo on the right-hand side, that is the Sky Tree. That is the tallest building in Tokyo. I went the wrong way. That was one of the chase vehicles, very futuristic. So after the competitors went by, then the bus came and picked up the ITOs that were along the way, and every intersection we came to was blocked off by police buses. I'm not quite sure why they need that many police buses in Tokyo, but they had a lot of them. And in this photo, 8 of those people are police or volunteers. The number of they had lining the course was mind-blowing. And speaking of mind-blowing, they say Japan has more vending machines per capita than anywhere in the world. Yeah, they were everywhere. 2 of our officials were pretty pumped to be able to have breakfast in front of Tiffany's. Well, no, let's see. She was more excited than he was. I have yet to figure out what that building was, but it's, again, kind of mind-blowing. This is what I discovered, being that we were in a bus following behind the competitors and all the other chase vehicles, and all the spectators were still there. And so if you started waving, they were just so excited that someone was waving at us. So for the 2 hours it took us to get back to stadium, we were waving at everybody. It was so much fun. I even got one of the police to wave at me. I was pretty pumped. And so what is the number 1 topic of discussion by officials at any meet? It's food. And yeah, they fed us well. Apparently we got hot meals, dinner, supper, and this is an azushi. It's a Japanese rice, and it is one of my favorite foods, had been before I went, and so I was thrilled to be able to get this at every meal. So more specifically about being a starter's assistant, which I was lucky to be several days that I was, there's no international officials working as starter's assistants. I was in the call room. So I thought this was a pretty special talent to be able to pull that many wheelies behind you, especially around corners. So this was maybe a quarter of the throwing frames that we did pre-inspection on, and it was hot that day. So being in a tent was mind-blowing. And not all of the frames came for pre-inspection. So there was a lot. There's just a photo of some of the ones that we were looking at. I think this one was the coolest one, and mainly because of the signage at the bottom. It was obviously from Greece, and yeah, I mean, some of them, like, yeah, they were built in somebody's backyard, but this one was pretty impressive. So what was the two biggest, most common problems that we had with the frames? There wasn't a lot that came through on pre-check, but when we checking them before competition, the first one was the padding was too thick. And the second one was they were unlevel. And so trying to tell people from other countries who don't speak the languages, it was difficult. I thought it was kind of brilliant. The guy from Japan, he would take pieces of tape and he would put the height on the one end. This is only 74 and this is only 75. So to give them the visual of, yes, your seat's unlevel. So it worked well. So to solve the padding, we used packing tape. We just handed them a roll of packing tape and made them just cinch it down as much as they could. And so all of them were rectified by using packing tape. To being unlevel was, that was a little bit more interesting. It's varied from situation to situation, but I thought this was the most ingenious one that we came up with. Taped onto the bottom of those legs, or two of the legs, was bottle caps from water bottles. Now, I asked somebody who was doing throws at that one to take a picture for me to see if they got squished down during competition or if they stood up. So I don't know if they stood the test of time, but it made them a legal chair in short notice. So warm-up track was the same diameter as competition track. So then when the wheelies went out onto the main track, they weren't given that lap to set their compensators because they were able to set their compensators, in theory, on the warm-up track. I found out afterwards there were some issues with letting them, because they had to share the track with ambulatory. There was a few issues there, but for the most part, it worked really well. It saved that lap and a cool down lap and whatever. A cool touch was they had morning glories that lined the path from the warm-up track to the call room. And all of these, every one of these plants had a little note written by school children. Now, the majority of them were in Japanese, and so most people couldn't understand what the note said, but it was just cool to have them there. Technical meeting was all via Zoom. So I just thought this group might be just like to see. That was what we were looking at for latest time 10 to the call room. So there is a quick photo of call room 1. And this is what automatically popped up, road from the call room 1 to call room 2. Now, it wasn't quite this long, but it was an interesting thing. You had maybe 20 meters that they had level ground, and they had to come down here, which wasn't quite so bad going, but coming back was a bit of a challenge. So ambulatory wasn't too bad, but for some people, it was a bit for them to navigate this. So they did have vehicles. Again, they'd had to have several of these vehicles going back and forth to get everybody back and forth. I took a lot of slack for this picture when I posted it on my, or not slack, feedback from my wonderful children when I posted that. So this guy, he called himself the gatekeeper. I thought this was pretty cool. So he was the guy that opened the gate for the Olympics and the Paralympics. So every athlete that came in for every event at the athletics was led into the call room by this gentleman. It was, I don't know, kind of cool, I thought. So again, this is me just being so cool. So this is, instead of posting a sign at the beginning saying this is all the times for the day, they did this. for each session. So they put the time it's going to enter. It's big. It's got letters. It was anybody, no matter what language you spoke, you could understand. You can see there on the bottom that he had the extra ones that he would put up as the next ones come through. It worked really well because then people could come up and it's easy to see at a glance exactly what time it was that they would needed to come in. Then they had similar signs set up at each pod in call room 1. When it was time for them to go to call room 2, they just, I can give you these pictures later, Jennifer. I knew you'd be enthused by this. So then, then he took the sign out of the cone and then he used that so the athletes would follow them down into call room 1. It worked slick. Then once you got down into the second call room, there was another sign sitting there already so that they knew where they needed to go. And then once it was time to go out on field to play, again, took the sign, escorted them out. A little bit same setup as what Jane showed you, but a little bit more of a challenge because they were taking those chairs up and down all the time because you convert it from wheelchair to ambulatory, and it was a challenge doing the schedule for call room. So they had those whiteboards. They had motivational signs on there. Not only were they giving the information that they need, they had inspirational messages to everybody. It was, again, kind of cool. So the proposal created quite the stir for everybody. There was a lot of talk on our ITO WhatsApp. And surprisingly, one of the biggest guys involved in it was our technical delegate, who was kind of straight-laced, but it was just like, how did that ring get in there? How did that get through the call room? That's not legal to come through the call room. A lot of discussion. Then the one ITO sent that nowhere on the list of contrabands is rings. So really, it would have been legal for him to bring the ring in. It just so happened that I heard a commotion. I was in call room 1. I heard a commotion and I went up and I was able to talk to the newly engaged couple, and he did not take the ring with him. One of the teammates or one of their delegation handed the ring to him after the event. We all had a lot of fun with that experience. So they had these measuring sticks made up. So it was already with codes on it already. So it was easy for them to measure the tethers at a glance. Worked really slick. So 2 tethers that weren't exactly regulation. So we had, again, technology was wonderful. We were able to, in call room 2, quickly take a picture, send it to technical delegate. He said, nope, they can use the one on the left, and bing, bang, they were out there. I didn't put a caption on this one. I honestly don't remember what this was for. I never saw it used. I think it was for measuring the soles of the shoes. I didn't quite understand it, but I had to take a picture of it. When we're doing our tour at the ITOs, I'm thinking, what am I looking at here? So on a closer look, this was his weather rider. If you go back and you look at your weather riders, there's already a hole in it. All you have to do is just run the string through it and make it so you can put it over your shoulder to carry it with you. So you don't have to have it in your hand all the time. So the little bits for the track is, yes, they walk the track all the time. This was cool, right? They had the lane numbers right beside the relay exchange zone. So it saves you counting 1, 2, okay, yeah, here's your zone. That was kind of handy. This was, yeah, again, it wasn't a regulation rest, but again, approved by technical delegate. Kind of sharp looking. In theory, the rest is supposed to be the same color as the track. A little difficult when you use the same all the time to have it to match the track. So we were lucky, the officials from Canada, we did not have to quarantine when we came home, but a lot of our colleagues did have to quarantine when they got home. The ones from Australia had to end up quarantining for 4 weeks based on their regulations. Of course, they were all sending us pictures of where they were quarantining, and we were just a little jealous when this is where this guy was quarantining. Like, really? I wouldn't have minded quarantine if I had to go to a place like that. And that's it. Open for questions.
I've got a question for David. Hi, this is Ian Reed. David mentioned in the in the video rooms, he said that there was also the room for the teams to look at video. What was the purpose of their looking at videos here? Was this allowing teams to basically go on fishing expeditions, or would they have a more driving reason to look at video?
Ian, I'm not sure where David is or if he had to go to another meeting, but no, the teams are not allowed a fishing expedition. What the video room is, they go down to the Technical Information Center and they launch a verbal appeal or a verbal protest. And upon launching a verbal protest, then or a request to see video on a certain part of a race, on a certain event, and they're taken up to see that. And then they decide whether they want to appeal or not. So we try to prevent fishing expeditions. And we don't let them see the whole race either. We ask them, what do you want to see, and why do you want to? And their athlete must be in that round or that heat to be able to look at the video. And normally we allow 2 delegates per team in to see the video. But for COVID reasons, Hawkeye requested that only 1 team member was allowed in, as well as the viewing room was extremely small. So the referee usually has to be in there along with the team member, and sometimes a Hawkeye, a staff member to manipulate the video. So I hope that helped.
Sorry, just a quick follow up on that. Was that time included in the clocks running on them when they have like 30 minutes after results to file an appeal, or at what point did that clock come into play?
Well, they can launch a verbal appeal, or sorry, a verbal protest, which the referee deals with. And upon receiving that, response, now they have 30 minutes to extend it to a formal written appeal or just drop it.
I've got a question. It's Valerie. I jumped in a bit late, so this might have been a topic of discussion, and if it is, just tell me. The only thing I noticed when I was watching through all of it, the Olympics and the Paralympics, was why did they make the officials in some instances wear like suit jackets and long pants in that heat? That's the one thing I took. Oh my goodness gracious. I understand it's probably part of the I was concerned for some of them, and I'm wondering if you've got some insight onto when it's the formal attire.
Valerie, I can only comment on the Olympics, but for the Olympics, normally for the morning session, you wear the informal uniform, which is usually a polo shirt and pants. And for the evening session, it is dress pants, a dress shirt, and a blazer and the hat. Because for the Olympics, it was extremely hot. It was in the high 30s, sometimes 40 for the whole day with high humidity. It was determined that we would wear the informal uniform for the whole time, with the exception of the last 2 evening sessions. And you do not have in the Olympics or in the World Championships, you don't have a choice in what you wear. What they decide you're going to wear, that's what you wear. Shorts are never worn in the World Championships or the Olympics. I don't think even the volunteers wore shorts, although our pants zipped off, but you wear pants. I mean, it's a formal occasion, but I think, well, I'm not even going to mention on behalf of Louise. Louise, you say what happened in the Paralympics.
Yeah, we were lucky. We were hot at the beginning, but about, I don't know, we'll say roughly halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, it started to rain periodically, cooled us right off. So when we had to wear formal uniforms, not a problem, because it was tolerable at that point. But we did the same thing. We only did it for 2 evenings. Again, same thing, because it was just too hot. And yeah, nobody wore shorts, even the volunteers. They all had to wear pants.
To give you an instance of how hot it was, the wind gauge is placed at 50 meters from the finish line. And when sprints weren't run, that wind gauge could register the temperature. And during the Olympics, in the morning session, when that temperature hit 40 degrees, they turned it off so that nobody could see how high it really went. So it was wicked hot. And we got to wear masks the whole time too.
That was the other thing. I understood that, but I went, there's not too many sports where the suit, the blazer is the uniform of an official. And again, I'm kind of new to this, and I was just going, everyone's in, running attire, dying of the heat. And then you see someone in the background in a suit going, why?
And we're in the bottom of a bowl. Right? The shirt's open, but it's a bowl. So even if there's a wind, you don't get much of it down there. For me to get those pictures with the flags fluttering, I probably had to take 25 pictures.
Or did they have fans below, Louise? I know in some championships, they have a fan blowing on the flags just to make them flutter. There's no breeze in the stadium.
Again, me trying to find all the stuff in the back, but yeah, I saw the fans, but no, they didn't use it. There was just an ever so slightly a breeze would come through once in a while.
Louise, it's Jennifer. I got a note through Vitris that 3 male athletes, I think it was class 51, were not allowed to compete because they were late. Do you know the reason why they were late? I presume transportation or something.
I honestly, I don't know the instance why they were late. I do know that transportation was an issue on occasion. I was directly involved in one occasion where their throwing frame was delivered to the wrong place, and so it was like beyond stress to have that throwing frame delivered at the last minute. So I honestly don't know. I don't know that it was not why those why those athletes weren't allowed to compete. I can't tell you. Okay. I do know that there was other athletes that came when I was in the call room 1, and they weren't allowed to come in. Mind you, the ones that I was there for, they were grossly past their check-in.
Yeah.
So why those 3? I mean, they were allowed to compete, but yeah.
Yeah, one of them won the gold medal in Rio at the Paris. So I guess there was some hot traffic. I just thought maybe you knew something about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
I have asked the jury, the chairman of the jury, to give us a synopsis of the stuff that they deal with, because that is something that he normally does. I have yet to receive that. So if I ever get insight into what happened in the call room there, I will definitely share it with this group.
Thank you. That would be helpful. I think if there are any more questions that you think about over the next couple of days, Anthony, do you have my email up on
so if
the screen there?
If there's any additional questions, I've put Jennifer's, Keith's, Brian, and Ian's emails. If you have any questions, just send them to Jennifer and she'll get an answer for you.
Okay. And I think we're just maybe 10 minutes past our time that we said. When Brian returns, he and I will be planning our next meeting. We're looking at probably November, just before the holidays start. And we will send out an agenda for that one. And we will probably, hopefully, be discussing one of the new clinics that has come out from the split program between the starters assistants and the call room. So I want to thank all our presenters tonight. Thank you to Jane. Thank you to David. Thank you to Louise. And thank you to Anthony, who is Brian's son, for doing a fantastic job. And thanks to Serge for all the work he does. I hope everyone has a great evening, and we'll be seeing you in a month or so. Take care and thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That was great.
Thank you.